Welcome to the Cybersecurity Simplified podcast, where we take the mystery out of today's top security threats and solutions. AI fortifies cybersecurity, but it also strengthens cyber threats. How can your company tackle this double-edged dilemma? Let's ask today's guest, Rob Lee, Chief of Research at the SANS Institute, the go-to leader in cybersecurity training. With more than 20 years of experience in digital forensics and incident response, Rob is dubbed the Godfather of DSIR, and we'll get to that initialism in a second. He's also the co-author of the must-read book, Know Your Enemy. Get ready to learn about the critical expertise gap in AI that could leave you vulnerable, why research is a game changer before deploying AI solutions, and the hidden dangers of over-regulating AI in cyber defense. Stay tuned for this timely conversation. It really could change how you approach AI in your cybersecurity strategy. Hi, everyone. I'm your host, Susanna Song, and today hosting with me is Mark Porter, Chairman and CEO of Highwire Networks. Mark, welcome back. Never a dull moment when you join the conversation.
Well, thank you for allowing me back. I wasn't sure after that last time. Well,
I'm eager to get started on this topic of AI. I also want to touch on security culture and also get into Rob's wheelhouse of DIFR, which stands for Digital Forensics and Incident Response. So Rob, great to have you on. We have lots to cover.
Yeah, really excited to be here. Thank you.
Rob, most people, I assume, have heard of SANS, but may not really understand what the organization does. So before we get into AI, can you just elaborate really quickly on the importance of having the SANS Institute around?
So the SANS Institute's been in existence for about 35 years, but we've really spearheaded efforts on cybersecurity, skill enhancement, training, certification. But what a lot of people don't know behind the scenes is we also do a lot of mission work, advocacy, helping people out new to cyber, really inspiring people to get started in their career and really helping out organizations, tackle really difficult cybersecurity related issues.
Thanks for sharing. Yeah, that's awesome. As we pivot to AI, I think, and I mentioned it in the intro, but there is a lack of expertise on AI in general. What are you seeing right now? And it's become a buzzword, right? Every organization is like, I gotta somehow incorporate it into my business strategy. But what are you seeing out there?
Well, Gen AI and machine learning, deep learning are not exactly new things, especially in the cybersecurity product space. A lot of cybersecurity products out there have been utilizing as part of their DNA machine learning, deep learning, looking for adversaries, even stuff down to antivirus. Where organizations are starting to really question the cybersecurity and security of AI implementations is when they're looking at bringing in third-party Gen AI capabilities, or if they're looking at deploying their own, such as in their own chatbots who are doing customer service, product design, secure coding. All of these things kind of wrap into organizational concern, specifically when it comes to AI deployments.
Yeah. So overall, what are some key areas organizations should focus on then for AI implementations prior to deployment?
So, you mentioned this part of it, your earlier question as well, is that when we're talking about, AI in organizations, specifically, it's almost easier for organizations out there and individuals out there to attack implementations that are, that exist, trying to get it to do something that it shouldn't do. And designing that from, secure by design principles, very similar to how they're doing cloud implementations and, product design, from secure coding aspect. A lot of AI implementations are rushing to market. And the concern is a right one, that is the AI not able to be manipulated, moved, or potentially even disabled by threat actors. So when we're starting to talk about, organizations that are looking at third-party applications that they're trying to bring in or potentially deploy their own, there's a absence of, well, how do I do that securely? we just ran an AI summit, I'd say about a month ago now. Actually, it is exactly a month ago now, where we had a full day of expert speakers that came in. And in talking, on the side with a lot of these expert speakers, one of the questions I have is like, there's these frameworks that exist, MITRE Atlas, the OWASP Top 10. A lot of those focus in on ways that attackers can manipulate Gen AI, especially in LLMs. What doesn't exist near as easy to follow document that potentially steps an organization through how to deploy it securely with as least risk as possible. That doesn't exist as much. And so we're talking about lack of AI expertise, is that all the data scientists out there are obviously they're gainfully employed by the product and third-party manufacturers. You would probably, not be able to be, recruit, and if they do exist out there, a cybersecurity data scientist specialist who is building the AI implementation by default. It's the same issue that happened in secure coding, that you have a lot of talent out there. They're able to rip out applications left and right, but it was a forced upon measure that secure coding principles then came into the thought process a lot later, because, simple things like website design, the cross-site scripting vulnerabilities that still predominantly exist. This is actually, still talking about it today, that we still are running into these issues, even by the coding side. AI just amplifies that even more so, because you're shoving so much of your organizational data into it to be useful. And as a result of that, how do you know it's secure? And this is something a lot of the experts out there saying they're starting to focus more on the research to be able to inform organizations how to deploy it securely.
So, Rob, when you look at I think you just kind of hit on a key point for those who aren't real well versed in AI and understand it conceptually. You're feeding and allowing it to consume, theoretically, everything about your product, your organization, whatever, if you're interfacing with the public and a consumer. How does one go about proposing or building guardrails around that today without that expertise available? What are people doing? What are you seeing?
That's a great question. A lot of organizations are not fully, from what I've seen and talking to organizations, especially executive leadership teams, what ends up happening is that a lot of organizations are still trying to wrestle with what is the business case for Gen AI. Mm-hmm. And those organizations that are leaning forward are saying, especially right now, that they're developing customer service chatbots or something like that. There's a lot of, product design features and capabilities that they're feeding into the AI, just to be able to answer these, questions that someone might be able to feed the chatbot. So first of all, a lot of organizations currently, kind of wrestling with these, should we? And then, what is the risk? And because the risk is not discernible and defined, in addition to the return on investment is not as clear and defined, there's this hesitancy and not completely full adoption by a lot of organizations out there. Those that have done it, and kind of recommendations that exist out there, is really having a focus and slowing down the deployment and making sure that the training data is right, that you have individuals out there, even from cybersecurity, that are specifically trying to test the bounds, and then you said the guardrails, specifically that the chatbot cannot be manipulated or convinced of something else based on the prompts that are it's feeding. Again, the prompt injection and the data poisoning aspect that, again, a lot of the MITRE Atlas, in addition to OWASP Top 10, mention, but they kind of generally hint about how to potentially go about doing that. But it goes back into, talking to a lot of experts out there, significance of deploying the training data, and then on top of that, making sure that you're stressing it out in as many different ways as possible before you do a full deployment of it.
Would you say the bad actors are leveraging AI way better than us defenders and practitioners?
To a certain extent, yes. They're, but again, trying to point facts to threat groups out there that are leveraging AI, they also are dipping their toes into it. There's very few threat actors saying, well, I'm going to go target someone's LLM and, try to manipulate. They're still using AI almost like you and I are doing, is that their, traditional means of exploitation. Their favorite one is phishing attempts. Mm-hmm. They are using AI to be able to craft much better capabilities for doing that, because, take even the difference between UK English and US English. just the difference in an S versus a C in the word defense, or, how theater is spelled. If it's a coworker of yours, from the UK emailing you in the US, you would notice like, oh, this is the way they typically spell things. They would be able to nail that a lot better now because of the fact that they're able to say this person regionally is sitting here, make sure the dialect, the conversation matches where they're from. They could even take online samples that you have written. Good example, for what you guys is someone could transcribe the way that you talk and then be able to replicate that. And that has been, we have definitive examples of that at this point. But going back to, because AI is still a bleeding edge technology, not every organization has its own AI implementations yet. The threat actors are not looking at it as like, okay, this is the easy way in. They're looking at what's the website. Let's do a cross-site script way before they're saying, let's take a look at the data that's stored in an LLM.
So as you look at, I think the saving grace for us in that aspect is that they're always looking for the low-hanging fruit or the path of least resistance, like frankly, a lot of criminal activity, right? You don't go after Fort Knox if you don't have to, do that. So as it proliferates, should we expect to see that this becomes a much more sophisticated challenge? Because today, as you stated, first of all, it's out of reach for a lot of organizations cost-wise because they can't find the talent, they don't have the budget, they can't figure out the ROI. As we, like with most technologies, at some point it will proliferate, kind of what then, given the fact that we don't have the security, the human expertise to do this at any sort of scale, to protect against this at any sort of scale today. What do we see coming at us?
Well, as this is a very, for what you could tell what's being put into it, especially a lot of organizational documents, you definitely know that this becomes a very attractive target long-term. That, if you're especially looking for espionage or the ability to even disable an organization, because the more reliance that you depend on, take email, for example, if you took out email or the ability to do Zoom calls for an organization today, for a lot of people, it's like, well, I don't know what to do. They're stuck. So if you're looking for, direct espionage, it's an extremely attractive target. If you're looking for, disablement or, trying to pull back an organization but be able to run effectively, they also become very ripe targets because more people are going to rely on it. More of your back-end processes are going to rely on it. And with the Gen AI models that are coming out, we're only touching the surface, of we're interacting with a prompt. Once we get to AI agents where, that's within a year, less of being able to, every person out there is going to be able to let an AI make decisions for them, respond to emails if it's from you. These types of capabilities, the manipulation of this becomes even more attractive long-term.
Hey, it's interesting. You mentioned Zoom calls. I'll just say, generic video calls like the one we're on. This morning, somebody asked me if we use AI. Somebody didn't fully understand it. Asked me if we use AI in our meetings, and I said, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "Well, I see these things and these names in a call I was on the other day, and I didn't know what they were. And somebody told me it was recording us. This is an executive at a mid-sized business, and he's just not very technology savvy. He's more of a finance guy, and we went through it. And I said, yes, I see them all the time. We use them internally. I don't, because I don't want all of our calls transcribed. I'm not fond of that. I am old school and take notes. But when you look at something as simple as that, I asked him the question that he couldn't answer, and I told him to go figure it out and then come back and we'll have a conversation, which is, where is that information stored? How is it protected? And an executive in the company had no idea at all. And I'm not sure his IT team does either, because you've got all these shadow apps out there that nobody's really watching. It just comes with the subscription that you get for your phone service.
Exactly. And what you're hitting upon is, these third-party delivery vehicles, take or meeting transcription. Otter's one. There's several others. Even Zoom has its own notes feature that you could enable that'll do this. Now, first touch upon the benefits that it's extraordinary, actually. I've played around with it. I've, recorded conversations with a coworker just walking, and I say, hey, do you mind if I record this just to capture? Because we don't have a notepad in front of us, but it captures the summary of the talk. It says here what the action items are. It is, kind of flooring when you end up taking a look at the capability. But then I also have the question is like, okay, Otter just stored our conversation, but where? But it's equivalent to the question that Microsoft has OneDrive, and have AWS have capabilities there. They're obviously storing in cloud providers. A even more pointed example is your iPhone. If you have one, that you have all your private pictures, we're trusting Apple that, that's, they've come out, that's encrypted because we know that law enforcement has a really tough time getting in, forcing Apple to, release this stuff. But, is it stored in the cloud, Apple's cloud, correctly encrypted? Only you have access to it through your physical device or through your computer. That trust initially was questioned, but but obviously it's increased. But it's not every company is Apple, and so you have to question that and say, like Apple, you're storing my stuff, especially private conversation. We may be talking HR, finance, really critical business data. What is the likelihood someone's able to go customers' data and then jump into my data accidentally? Valid questions, and the organizations out there that are storing these in the cloud hopefully are using some of the cloud capabilities, from AWS, Microsoft, Google to help protect them. But the question is valid and should be asked by those organizations before they deploy them. Same thing with Zoom calls.
I actually heard something even about a week ago, and it really gave me pause. As organizations need to think about this, oftentimes those devices, this is just kind of a crazy thing, but it's becoming a leak issue, a data leak more than a data breach issue, which is those things will often send the transcription to multiple parties on the call. And I've seen a couple of stories now in the last 2 weeks where somebody did not disconnect from the call. The thing continued to record and recorded subsequent conversations that we're having on the phone while it was up on a desk, and that information was transcribed, and there were HR conversations. So you have a data leakage issue that is just not ideal.
But this is not entirely an AI centric issue. It's no different than OneDrive cloud capabilities that you create a link and say, I'm sharing it out accidentally as an email to a group list on accident, or what you end up having your own Zoom call, but you have you record it, username and password. It's the same issue all these third-party providers have that, even Google Docs, it's like share it out, edit, public, and you paste it somewhere you shouldn't have. And again, we have attackers out there actually scouring, looking for where's their open, data sets that are out there I potentially get access to. These are the types of things that are not directly AI centric. It's the same problem, but AI also has it. As much as cloud service, software as a service providers, it's the same issue. People questioned initially about Zoom. Remember when people used to do Zoom bombing? Zoom had to
start of COVID, yeah. Oh yeah.
It's much as the same thing that you have data poisoning injection, from AI, and they're going to have to wrestle with the same things these providers did early on during the pandemic.
Yeah, I think this is a good moment now to segue and broaden out the conversation, because it is more than just AI. I think this also relates to just security culture as a whole, Rob. And I've seen a video that you recently put out on social media that, and you take a very clear stance that security awareness and security culture are not the same. So tell us, what does it consist of then? What is a security culture in a business? It's not just throwing a 4-minute video at, your employees to make sure that they're trained.
I just was on a different call, a very similar question came up, and you have to take a look, some of the historical aspects of why all of a sudden is this predominant. When CISA released its CSRB report on Microsoft this past April, it took a really negative stance on Microsoft's culture, and it kept on labeling its security culture as one of the predominant factors as to why the Microsoft breach occurred. So they're deploying these services. Of course, typical CISOs are looking at how do I protect the organization? But now, with the security culture becoming a little bit more well-defined, it's not just, hey, I'm protecting an organization. It's in the products and services that you're also deploying. Now, this is not every organization, because there's a lot, that are still producing aluminum cans or, products for Walmart. But those that are providing, like we're talking of Zoom and Microsoft and others, what is the likelihood that someone could penetrate your product and potentially exploit it from that aspect? And this is where, leaning forward as part, it's very similar to the security initiative, is that everything that we're deploying has to match this mentality. So the way I try to describe this to, when I'm talking to my mom or, my sister about this stuff, is that certain industries have this safety first mentality. Take the car industry, for example, or even the pharmaceuticals. Even though they, there's these new capabilities that are being deployed, and look at this, people look at it, what is a crash safety, mechanism for that? What is the likelihood of something going bad with that? Airlines, the same issue, is that, the 737 situation they ran into, a few years ago, they're held to in like this, this mentality that we need to provide as a part of our product on the forefront of it, like as one of the top 3 features, safety and security. A lot of software as a service and cloud providers, rushing things to market, very similarly what we're having in AI, almost identical. We need to generate revenue. We need to get the product out as fast as possible. Where they take shortcuts is on the safety and security side. And that's where the security culture is starting to, really take hold. You need to be like the automotive industry and say, we are putting safety and security as a part of our product first. And we're confident that if something happens, we're going to be able to fix it rapidly. And we're, testing the, bejeebies out of it to make sure that what you're touching is as secure as possible.
Yeah, so it's much more of a strategic conversation. It involves leadership, right? From the top down. It has to be a decision. We always say it's not an IT problem. It doesn't fall on the IT guy, but it takes a broader, from the top up type of decisions if you want to incorporate a culture of security and safety.
Yes, and accountability, when you go back to the CSP report, did result in Microsoft taking a stance on this. And now, they've come out, I think it was about 6 weeks ago, their update to their Microsoft Secure Futures Initiative is the way they're calling it. And the report does a really decent job of shifting that mentality. It says our products, come with security first. It's almost really transitioning into very similar to automotive and other industries that have to, to survive, literally put a safety and security mentality first, that, you use our product, you're safe. There's this aspect of comfort that, getting with it. Another analogy that I like to bring up is, take, for example, it's a broken window theory, that you're walking down a dark street and you see broken windows, graffiti everywhere. You're a little bit more, that is not a, safe environment, for you. You're a little bit more, concerned about like what's going to happen. And comparison to that, take, the average university out there that, has security guards, they have the blue lights, they have, completely different aura around it that, you feel safe, moving from point A to point B in that environment, even at 2 a.m. Mm-hmm. That's the kind of, feeling that not only your employees should have in working there, that's the type of environment that you also need to provide your customers. And, that's where, when you have security come in, it's like, well, security ends up removing capabilities from this. Security should be almost a transparent capability that enables people to take enough risk, but providing that safety net and parachute that, hey, we're going to pull you back if you, extend yourself too far.
What stands in the way, Rob, when you're looking at product development? I mean, I think about things, as a CEO, I think about how do we bring this to market cost effectively to provide enough value? Is it cost proposition? Is it trade-offs in functionality that sacrifices the product? Is it all of the above? What are the big roadblocks?
Well, it's a little bit all of the above, but the organizations, and I there's a mantra out there that when I was in business school, one of these things I decided a long time ago, because of instant response, it's easier to come in with have a little bit of business background. But the thing that even back then that was said is security dollars are not the fun dollars. IT dollars are fun dollars. You get a new computer system, you get a new phone, you get, hey, this is cool. Security dollars are the ones that are just almost pure cost. It reduces revenue. It is one of the things every organization, even trying to deploy it into their products, it is an additional, slows things down. They have to test it more. The deployment is, aggravated. And, when you're trying to balance that with rushing products to market and being the first mover, especially in the AI space, touching upon that a little bit more, is that it's de-incentivized because those that move first end up, in many cases winning. Take OpenAI, for example, its deployment. Now Apple Intelligence is coming out. We have no idea, if Apple Intelligence is secure or not, or can be manipulated until it's finally in our hands and people really start messing with it. But, I think there's a little bit more trust in Apple, in terms of, hey, they've really proven themselves over the years to take security, as seriously as others. And Microsoft's taken hits, on the other side. That's why they're coming out like, okay, we've changed our mantra about this. We're going to slow development. And even the CSRB report said, we want Microsoft to pull back on how fast it's deploying product to market and capabilities in existing products, even that it's revenue generating, to make sure security is taken care of first. It's a hard decision to make because you're constantly balancing, is that the right decision versus first mover capabilities. Not easy for executives to wrestle with, but again, there's enough examples out there. If you don't do it, here's the risks that are, and it's a straight risk equation.
Well, we are kind of getting close to the end of this episode, but I really want to hear more about why you are the godfather of DSIR. So please enlighten all of us of what you mean by digital forensics and incident response, and what you're preaching and evangelizing out there around that very topic.
And what kind of ring comes with being the godfather of DFI?
Yeah, there's a ring that, oh geez. Well, first of all, I'm like a pilot handle. I will fully admit that this is a reluctant title that, someone said during a presentation once, you really got to hand it to Rob. People don't know him. He's the godfather of digital forensics. Everyone was like, oh, that's perfect. And I'm like, I don't really, and then it kind of stuck. And then, of course, we have people in marketing that says, oh, you should put that on your profile. I'm like, oh. But what really came down to is, early in my career, I was working in digital forensics and incident response at some of the earliest threat actors. Going back to 1998, we're dealing with Russian threat actors, Moonlight Maze, doing that investigation. And there was a ton of people, working in that capability. And, even one of my friends who works in DOJ still to this day, Obi Carroll, that I worked with in the AFOSI, was introducing me to another friend. He said, oh, Rob, he's one of these individuals that he set up a system that when the intruder came in, we were recording the commands of the intruder, and I would be watching it on my pager. Now, you have to go back to 1998. This is what you had a text pager that you could get your emails on. And it was the only way you had, the ability to watch an intruder in there, and they're watching on the pager. And there was an email they could send that if the intruder got too far, they were, wanted to do something actually malicious, they could cut off the intruder, set up, block that system, and they had the control in their hands. This is the kind of thing that Obi, said he was doing this early on. So this innovation that I was kind of, part of, because I was one of the first ones out there, a lot of the tool sets and so forth, techniques. And then I started teaching, thousands of people in digital forensics and incident response, that because of that, they look to me and say, hey, Rob, you got my career started. I was, kind of lost. And I was like, I really love these topics. And so this is where that, why that came to be, is like, it's a combination teaching for SANS and just feeling like I was making a difference, that I was training FBI, training Secret Service, training first responders, and when you think about that, these are the individuals that, again, I've, done a lot of that work too, that are putting bad guys, stopping them, putting bad guys in jail. And this type of, feeling of, cross-section of, being able to make that kind of difference is always what's moved me from behind the scenes. So this, back in, I think it was 2016, someone was, giving some credit to me, and it was on the stage at another public event and said, Godfather digital forensics. And, all right, kind of stuck at that point. So it's not a self-made moniker or anything like that. It's with a lot of foot dragging and reluctance that I've kind of accepted.
Do you think that businesses, though, don't prioritize the root cause analysis of an incident? as much as they're still focused on it, just recovering, right? Their
That's
data.
a loaded question.
100% nodding north and south in agreement on that. Even that, I feel like I'm dogging Microsoft and not, they've done such a great job, on what they've done. But even the Cybersecurity Review Board came out and said even Microsoft's own launch couldn't figure out root cause as to how the key infrastructure was penetrated in their Exchange backend services. It is still a big question mark. And as a result of that, and it's not that they couldn't do it or didn't have the capability, the inertia or will, it just couldn't be done. There was not enough data that went back far enough that allowed them to discover that. So in many cases, Microsoft came out with, they dumped memory and they pulled it from memory. That ended up being wrong. So, when organizations try to attempt to do root cause analysis, there is a possibility it is undetermined. And they actually, in many cases, need to come out and be honest about that in the public. And not saying Microsoft did, they were pretty confident at the point they were right. But, as the time goes on, you have more data, that wasn't the likelihood of how they potentially had that compromise occur for that root key that was eventually pulled. But, I use Microsoft there, but almost every organization that has ransomware attacks, what was it? What was the first system? Who was the one that clicked on it? And of course, there's this aspect of it, are you going to get a lot of cooperation from the people? So that wasn't me. They're, touch their finger to the nose.
Yeah.
It's I don't know who did it, and again, a lot of security personnel is like, oh shoot, I may have left something open. It's this willingness to say, we really need to find this. And that's also part of security culture that I touch upon in other organizations, is that do we reward people for doing security and finding breaches, or do we shame them? And right now, there's an aspect of this in the entire community out there, organizations, that you did something wrong if a breach occurred, and then it's a matter of like trying to regain public trust. But what if if you're doing a good job, if you discovered your own breach, you have someone else call you, that's where I get a little bit more concerned. But organizations that discover their own breaches, there should be this reward mentality that says, we did good, we found it, we stopped it. But right now, you imagine that, if you're the one that finds it, it's like, oh, shoot, did I secure this properly? Am I going to be shamed internally? Is this actually a bad thing? And you have to think about that organizationally. It's like, what have you seen personally out there in these other breaches? And talking to your peers and others in the security industry, what has happened? And part of that security culture is like, how do we pin the medal on those people that says, hey, you found the breach and part of that, you saved the company. Good job. That's not there yet.
That's a mind shift that I have gotten the luxury of talking to our partners and customers a little bit more of late. And even in the day-to-day habits of hygiene and identifying, I'm not a lifelong security practitioner. I've only been watching this for the last 5 or 6 years, day in, day out. And what I see is there's a tremendous opportunity to shift the culture to security isn't always about finding the breach. It's about finding the things that are going on in the way your network's being used, in the way your infrastructure is being used, that will lead to a breach. And there should be very significant upside for people who are finding those things and testing against those things, and not testing with the answer key, so to speak, right? Which is what I see. That's actually my biggest concern with product companies today, is that I feel that a lot of them, especially the ones with restricted budgets, the emerging technology, they're often testing with the answer key in hand. And testing against what works doesn't really help me figure out what doesn't. I think that's a really key point, Rob, because we talk to people all the time about finding those things, identifying things, and if your service providers are sending you information, looking deeper into that information to find out why did this happen, even if it was benign, is often an opportunity just to get better today.
If I would actually, if I had my coffee cup here, I would clink coffee cups with you for saying exactly spot on. That is 100%. I really appreciate you highlighting that, because that's true.
Well, thank you so much, Rob, for joining us today. We could continue this conversation, I'm sure, for much longer, but we're going to need to wrap here. So thank you so much for coming on. And I know we would love to have you back on this podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for coming, Rob.
And thank you so much to our listeners for joining us. I also want to take a moment here before we sign off to say that I will be stepping down as a host of Cybersecurity Simplified. It's been such an honor to have a seat in this program. When we started this podcast just a couple years ago, it was always with you in mind, our viewers and our listeners, and how we could help you embrace cybersecurity and not to fear it. I've appreciated all the great feedback from the community. And I do want to end by saying the show has so much more to offer. We have a great lineup of speakers and topics, very much like what we've experienced here today with Rob and all of the insights that he provided. So I will be on the other side listening and learning. So please stay in touch. And I'm looking forward to seeing how this podcast continues to grow.
Well, I'm hoping that we can get you on as a guest and actually learn a little bit more about Susanna Song and the next chapter of her career in the cybersecurity field, which looks to be very exciting to me.
All right. Well, I would love that opportunity, Mark. So thank you so much. And be sure to join us for our next episode. Until next time, I'm Susanna Song.
I'm Mark Porter.
And this is Cybersecurity Simplified. From all of us here at Overwatch by Highwire Networks, thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, rate the episodes you enjoyed, share, and leave us a comment. We'll catch you next time on the Cybersecurity Simplified podcast. Remember, the more you know about cybersecurity, the safer you'll be. To learn more, visit us at highwirenetworks.com/podcast.